Chapter 15, Sticky Notes. Chapter 15 has a lot of very important information to learn, and some of it is just plain old memorizing, especially when it comes to the stages of water treatment and wastewater treatment. The case study is about the Colorado River, and the Colorado River has a lot of political fighting because California grew in population size much earlier than the other western states like Nevada, Arizona, Colorado. And so California has been accessing the Colorado River water and sending it mainly to Southern California, mainly Southern LA County, Orange County, and San Diego for decades. We don't get Colorado River water here in Santa Clarita, and we never have. But now that other western states have grown in population, they want some of that water because it flows through their states as well. And so there's a lot of political fighting over the water rights. Sometimes so much water is diverted from the Colorado River through aqueducts that there's none that actually reach the ocean. And so the wetlands there get damaged. So you can see the Colorado River here flows from Colorado all the way down to the Gulf of California, and we send aqueducts to Southern California, the San Diego area, and Palm Springs area, and all of these places want to use that Colorado River water. Alright, on page 403, make sure you know the definition of what fresh water is. It means not salty. Surface, oh, that is an autocorrect. Let me fix that. Not surface eater, it's surface water. There we are. Surface water is basically water on the surface, so your streams, rivers, lakes. Runoff is any water that runs off from rain and precipitation. And watershed. Watershed is basically anything that drains into a river. So any piece of land that drains into a river is called that river's watershed. And you also need to know these two stats. Only 3% of the water on the planet is fresh water, and so that makes 97% ocean water, which is salty. But of that 3%, 2% of it is locked in glaciers, so really 1% of the world's water is available for humans to use. That is not a lot. Know the word floodplain, riparian. Riparian means anything that has to do with the river. So riparian ecosystems are river ecosystems. And a tributary is a stream or river that flows into a bigger river. So the Ohio River runs into the Mississippi River. So we say the Ohio River is a tributary of the Mississippi. Closer to home, we have our Santa Clara River, and we have several tributaries that run into the Santa Clara River, like Piru Creek, San Francisco Creek, Bouquet Creek. Those all run into the Santa Clara River. For the ponds and lakes, you do need to know the layers. You need to know the littoral layer, the limnic, limnetic, profundal, and the benthic. Benthic's easy because it's bottom, so B for bottom, benthic. So make sure you do know the definitions of all these layers, and it's described for you up here where you would find the different critters that live in the different zones, and do make sure you know that. Let's talk about eutrophic lakes. Eutrophication can happen in lakes as well. But what happens in lakes is that more nutrients mean more lake plants. And eventually, if it's a small lake or pond, it can completely fill up with plants, and then you don't have a lake or pond anymore. It's just completely turned into kind of a marshy area or wetlands or just land altogether. And then we have something called oligotrophic lakes. these are the opposite of eutrophic, and these are lakes that are crystal clear, and people think, oh, they're so beautiful. Well, actually, they don't have very many nutrients, and so there's not a lot of light, and you end up with very high oxygen compared to eutrophic lakes where there's very low oxygen. And that, if you remember eutrophication, there's very little oxygen because you got algal blooms, which are then decomposed by bacteria, and the bacteria use up the oxygen. And so you end up killing species due to lack of oxygen. That's eutrophication. And so the same thing happens in eutrophic lakes. Oligotrophic lakes are the opposite: low nutrients, clear water, and therefore high water, but high oxygen, but very little life. This is a term that's not in your book, but you do need to know. It's a very important term. BOD, biological oxygen demand. And so when things die, the organisms that decompose them, like bacteria, need oxygen to decompose them. And so this could be sewage, dead things, fecal matter, whatever's in the water. Bacteria need oxygen to decompose them, and that is the BOD. There's actually quite a lot to write about wetlands, so let's get started. You may need several sticky notes for this. A wetland, the definition of a wetland, and do know the definition, is a system where the soil is saturated with water and has plants that grow half submerged in water. A couple years ago on an FRQ, my students knew all kinds of things about wetlands, but I actually never taught them the definition, and so that was on an FRQ. So now I make sure that I teach them the definitions. They did well that year because they knew enough to get a good amount of points. Types of fresh wetlands: we have freshwater, and some of the names are called bogs, marshes, mires, moors. Oh, excuse me. Let me go back up. You may remember some from your literature readings of stories that are set in England. If you remember The Hound of the Baskervilles, Sherlock Holmes, that was set on a moor, and that is basically a freshwater wetland. Marine. Now, marine means ocean, and so any wetland that's on the coast of an ocean is called a marine wetland, and there's two types. Now, by the way, this is usually where a river flows into the ocean. There's two types. Around here in Southern California, we are in temperate climate. We're not tropical, we're temperate, and we have salt marshes. One that you can go visit and walk trails along is in Carpinteria. They have a restored salt marsh there. In the tropical locations like Florida, down around the Gulf of Mexico, they're actually much further south than us, and they have more tropical climate. And so you're going to have mangrove forests that are found there. So here's your environmental benefits of wetlands. You have biodiversity, providing a rich habitat. By providing a rich habitat, so the wetlands provide huge, rich habitat, lots of biodiversity, lots of photosynthesis from lots of plants. The base of the food web, all of the nutrients in a wetland provide algae, provide plants. That's the base of the food web. Cleans wastewater. The plants in wetlands can filter toxins and pollutants and sewage from water. And when you have a wetlands and you have rain, the runoff will soak into the ground and recharge your aquifers, so then you can pump it out later to use. It's a nursery for many species. So species of aquatic life will lay their eggs or lay their young in nurseries, and in the wetlands, and it protects them from predators and from other kinds of harm. So these are environmental benefits, things that benefit the environment. We also have some ecosystem services which provide economic benefit for wetlands. We get protection from hurricanes and storms from wetlands. One of the problems that we had with Hurricane Katrina several years ago in New Orleans was that so much of the wetlands had been destroyed, damaged, and filled in that there wasn't a lot of protection from the storm surge that happens with hurricanes. So flood protection. So when there is a flood, it costs a lot of monetary damage to repair, and so that's how you get an economic benefit. Tourism, lots of tourism dollars that come in from people visiting wetlands for fishing or for wildlife observation. Recharging the aquifers for us to use then to water our crops and earn money, that we don't have to build aqueducts to bring water from somewhere else. So anything that helps save us money and provide us money is an economic benefit. And then also cleaning our toxins. So if we have wetlands, we don't have to build wastewater treatment plants in some areas, and that saves us money as well. Remember on AP tests on FRQs, whenever you talk about an economic benefit, you have to mention money or jobs. There are many threats to wetlands. They're drained and filled in for development, like building homes and condos and stores and such. They're filled in or drained for agriculture as well. When we build a road or a bridge over them, they can cause air and water pollution. So runoff from the roads from oil spills or other kinds of antifreeze or things that get on roads, or even salt if it's an icy place, can run off into the wetland to cause water pollution. And then driving cars cause air pollution. And then wetlands are threatened by invasive species as well. For example, a lot of people bought Burmese pythons, which are actually endangered species in Burma. They bought them as pets. They got too big, and so they dumped them in the Florida Everglades, which is a national park, and it's an extremely protected area. So now they have a huge Burmese python population because they've met each other and mated, and they are driving out native species and causing huge amounts of problems in the Florida Everglades. So they have people that go out and hunt them to get rid of them because they're invasive there. The definition of groundwater is basically water beneath the surface. It's held within pores or rock, and it's hugely important because we rely on groundwater. That's when people have wells. They dig down and access the water and groundwater. An aquifer, and it looks like I spelled it wrong, so let me fix it. An aquifer is basically kind of just another name for groundwater in a way. We use them sort of synonymously. And in Santa Clarita, half of our water comes from groundwater, from aquifers. The other half comes from Northern California via an aqueduct. So you can see here a really nice picture of groundwater in aqueducts and how aquifers are recharged as well through melted snow or through runoff. So make sure you know this picture and caption. Really understand what an aquifer is. Sometimes an aquifer will bubble out of the ground. Sometimes through a hole, if there's enough pressure, it will come out and create a spring. Sometimes people dig wells down to aquifers as well. This is the largest aquifer in the whole world. It sits mostly under Nebraska and then parts of Colorado, Kansas, etc. It's called the Ogallala. Alright, make sure you know the water table. That's how far the water is underground, is the water table. An aquifer recharge zone, an artesian aquifer, and also know that the Ogallala is the world's largest aquifer. So over here we have a sticky note, and you need to know that Asia has the most fresh water, but the lowest per capita, which again means per person, because it has huge population numbers. You've got China with 1 billion, you've got India with another 1 billion, and Indonesia is also highly populated. So you have this area which has almost half the world's population, not quite, but almost half, and so they're all need water. So you can see that here it's the least amount really per person, and it actually shows it better on another graphic later. Make sure you know the word consumptive versus non-consumptive. So consumptive use is basically it's used up like the plants use it. So water in agriculture for irrigation is consumptive use. For us, when we drink the water, that's consumptive use. Non-consumptive use, but it removes it temporarily, but then returns it back. It's not necessarily used up. Here's a graphic of just basically how much water is diverted from the Colorado River into all kinds of dams here and there, everywhere, and water diversions and reservoirs and aqueducts. Know what an aqueduct is. It's a man-made river to carry water from one area to the other. The example in our town is we have the LA Aqueduct that runs through Santa Clarita, right by Saugus High, over the hill by the Walmart in Canyon Country. It's actually a big old pipe. That's a closed aqueduct in a pipe. It actually carries water from Santa Clarita Valley through SEV to Los Angeles City. We don't get any of that water. It runs through our town, but we don't get it. We get water from a different aqueduct. That's an open-air aqueduct called the California Aqueduct, and it runs down from Sacramento. You can see it when you drive north on the 5 freeway. Aqueducts are used heavily in California to bring water. Let me change that typo. Down from Northern California and the melted snowpack of the Sierra Nevada mountains to Southern California, or from the Colorado River to Southern California as well. So there's aqueducts along the Colorado. Know the example of the Owens River and Mono Lake that brings water to LA City. Not to us, but LA City. And this is kind of a good chart to show you some ways that we can make a difference. The AP test often asks, kind of the last question on FRQ, ways that we can reduce personal or household water use or agricultural water use. And so this is a good list here as well. So know the ways that you can help conserve water. They do the same for things like energy use and air pollution. They sometimes ask you a personal way that you can help as well. All right, we'll pause here and continue with the next video.